Ankit, hi. Good to have you with us. How have you been?
Good, Ashu. Thank you so much and glad to be here. How are you doing?
Doing very well, Ankit. And I say this. I think it's almost becoming cliche, right? But an exciting conversation, and I'm looking forward to this one, right? My team hates me for doing this, right? And I think their argument is that every how can every conversation be exciting, right? Which is the fact that I think India is kind of you know we've now kind of blossomed into an absolutely beautiful economy. We were always one, right? But I think we existed in many silos, right? But I think now is the time where we're actually coming together, right? There's a certain homogeneity which is coming into our ecosystem, right? Our consumption patterns are now becoming predictable, right? Of course, there are complexities that are getting built, and we're going to talk about some of that, right? But I think but we are, I think, becoming extremely digitally savvy, right? We're consuming of digital mediums a lot more than what we were. Thus, it becomes very exciting in that sense, right? Like I
Absolutely.
said, it's becoming a predictable environment in a certain sense and way, right? And I think you are essentially working to enable a lot of that, right? You are essentially filling that gap where many brands can possibly now talk to their consumers in a much sharper way. And we're going to talk about some of those nuances, right? But good to have you with us, Sanket. And yeah, looking forward to an exciting session.
Same here, Ashu. Same here. Very
Ankit,
excited to be here.
Ankit, before we talk about do your thing, right? And that's a and I would want to talk to you a little more about that name, right? But before we do that, right, I'd love you to take me through your quick round of introductions will be helpful. You've been there, you've been at it, right? Tell me a little more about that. It'll be a lovely starting point, and then we start off by talking about do your thing, right? And many aspects of the business, many facets of the business that you've built, right? I'd love to talk to you
Right.
a little more about that. But a quick round of introduction would be helpful.
Sure, Ashu. So, I always introduce myself as somebody who has been confused.
Mhm.
I've done a lot of things, worn a lot of hats up in the past. Literally doing pharmacy as my bachelor's, to then getting into MBA in marketing, and then jumping onto the digital front. Those were the Orkut days when people did not even know what an emailer would be, or
Mhm.
how to use Orkut for that
Right,
matter. So I've been literally stuck to digital since
right.
then, and that's the calling, if I have to call it that way. Have worked like literally across continents, in India, in the UK, and actually Do Your Thing was incepted. The inception happened in London. I was sitting in this beautiful park. I'm not sure if you've been there or not, but it's called Hyde Park.
Right,
And I saw, it was a beautiful summer afternoon. People were kind of chilling around,
right,
and that's where the inspiration came from. So, and another confusion actually came in, that should I be staying in the UK or should I be going back to India? But
right.
I'm glad, I'm thankful I came back to India, and started building Do Your Thing. So if I have to like literally put it in a nutshell, um, I've done various jobs, if I have to again put
Right.
it that ways. But digital has been the calling, and I've always been skewed towards the creative side and the tech side of the business. So yeah,
Super.
that's who I am.
Awesome. That's a lovely one, right? And I think Hyde Park is a beautiful place to get that inspiration, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Ankit, tell me a little more about Do Your Thing, right? I mean, it's started at a lovely note, right? It was more observational, right? But what's the construct of the company today, right? What is it that you're doing, right? Uh, my understanding at a distance is that you're essentially working on uh, enabling many people to pick up on their ability to influence, right? And essentially basically monetize that ability, right? So tell me a little more about the construct, right? What are the pieces that you have at Do Your Thing, right? What are the core activities? What are the business sides of it, right? Tell me a little more about that construct.
Right. So you're absolutely right, Ashwin, saying we do help people in monetizing their content, but there's just one aspect of it.
Sure.
And to explain what Do You Think does, let me just go back slightly and tell you
Sure.
again, that about that beautiful summer evening at Hyde Park. I was reading this book, Shoe Dog. It's on Nike's founder, and a
Right.
beautiful book if you've not read.
Uh-huh.
And while doing that, like I said, I saw all these people doing their thing. There were people who
Mhm.
skating, there were people who running, and there were people doing a lot of things. And
Right.
this thought came to my mind. There's so many hobbies that we have, or there's so many things that we like doing, but
Right.
eventually life happens and we end up doing something that we do not love. That's because we
Mhm.
have to make a living out of it.
Right.
But with internet coming in, and with decentralization of content, and with individual personalities taking over faceless publishers,
Mhm.
the whole idea of people being able to make a living out of what they love doing made a lot of sense, and it started becoming a reality. So that's where Do Your Thing comes from. We help people make a living out of what they love doing in the digital context. So that's the inception. So essentially, we started by making 3 promises to anybody who's on the digital mediums and various digital mediums. I mean, it's not just social media platforms. We said, one is we'd help you monetize your content. So we believe that digital assets are assets, and they should be monetizable, just like a car, a house, right? So if you're creating content on digital, you should be able to monetize that. And that's the first promise we made to our creators. The second promise we made to the creators is to tell them we would help you become better creators. And this is where actually the entire middle class of the creator economy comes in. So you've seen the billions of people who want to be creators and who are beautiful with the content that they can create, but still the top layer, which is earning money and being able to monetize. So that's where TYT Academy comes in. It's a place where the creators can teach other creators. So it's for the creators, by the creators. And the third promise that we made to them was being a creator or being able to monetize is almost like running a small business and being a founder itself. And being one, I know the problems that you face. I mean, you don't know the kind of legal contracts you're supposed to sign. You don't know how to tax. You don't know how to invoice. So we said we would help you all of that, like do all of that, so that you can focus on doing your thing, what you like doing. So that's the premise. That's the reason why we started, and that's essentially what the organization does. And then there are a lot of secondaries, like on the other hand, we help brands get branded content creation and advocacy done at scale, with deep data and all of those. So that's on the other side of the business. But this is the reason why DYT exists, and this is the reason why we actually kind of started with what we wanted to do.
Very interesting. So I think if I'm to put it right, if I'm to put it so the impression of that, of what you just said, right, the way it gets created in my mind, right, is essentially where you are helping people understand what they're possibly good at, right, and institutionalizing that creativity, right, which could possibly have a commercial outcome, right,
Absolutely.
and as per time availability, right, and you're doing that for people who are clear. You're possibly doing it by helping them engage with many brands, and people who essentially want to try out. You then have an academy format where you're kind of engaging with them and helping them understand themselves better, right, and how you can, like I said, how can you go out and institutionalize some of those messages, right? Okay, there's a very interesting thing that is happening, and I would love to just discuss a little more about the macros, right, of this particular industry, right? I mean, last 1.5 years has been unreal, right? In fact, a little over a year before that was extreme disruption, because we saw many platforms came up, right? We had Musical.ly, we had TikTok, right? We had ShareChat, and we had many platforms that have come up, right? Instagram today, for example, Reels is filled with content, right? People are creating a lot of content, right? What do you make out of this, right? In the sense that people have always been creative, right? They just essentially needed a platform to kind of go out and put that content, right? Or do you think this is some sort of a fad which is flying, right? Eventually it will start to normalize, right? What do you make out of this trend which we've been seeing in the last let's say a little over a year, right? Or do you think fad, it started as a fad, right, and it's taking a very different kind of a shape where we are seeing much better content just coming up? People and influencers are and creators are kind of understanding that they need to bring in and build right from the depth, because consumer is becoming more aware. There's more information which is available. What's happening in this landscape, right? Tell me a little more about that.
See, Ashu, so we have always been creative, and I mean, there's just a lot of talent which was unexplored till this whole decentralization of content started happening. I mean, think about it. 10 years back, or maybe 15 years back, the only content that we were able to consume was what these big publishers used to produce. NDTVs and Aaj Taks of the world. Now it has come down with, of course, like with the social media platforms coming in, with internet penetration going up like crazy, geo coming in, with your phones becoming better and better, the camera quality getting better, with a lot of these editing tools coming into play. This whole decentralization has happened to a large extent, where there's like everybody becomes a creator or everybody becomes a publisher. So it has always been there. I mean, that whole creative mindset, or that whole potential of doing stuff, it has always been there, but it was not channelized in the right direction, which now is happening. So definitely not a fad, I would say. Uh, Now, so if you see the last 10 years, it belonged to all these tech giants, social media giants, Twitters and Facebooks and Instagrams of the world. They showed the true potential of what a human being can do. And now the next 10 years, like I said, would be uh, uh, how to make a living off this, because
Right.
this is just an entirely different concept which we were not aware about.
Right.
So I'd sum it by saying it's definitely not fad. It's just that it was not explored, and now things are coming out because of technology and because of a lot of other plays coming in. Definitely has a huge part to play in the next 5 to 6 years, or maybe 10 years.
Interesting. Ankit, I'd love to talk to you a little about matrices, right? Because our matrices is something which is kind of still taking shape, right? There are not very clear. I mean, I think essentially what there are just about two basic parameters that I think any content creator is being evaluated, right? What's the kind of reach that him or her has? That's number one. Number two, what is the time spent on the piece of content, right? And I think the third is now kind of slowly and steadily starting to emerge, where there are people who are, and brands are now saying that, what's the transactional value of this engagement, right? And I think, but before I do that, right, I would love to talk to you a little about noise, right? Now, essentially, what has happened is because of what we've been seeing, right? Because of, like you said, right, cheap phones, cheap data, a lot of time, last 1.5 years, right? Everybody's taken to it, right? Everybody's kind of creating content, right? There are, of course, certain tools, right? There are tools that are getting people to, of course, experiment, right? Which are also helping a lot, many to kind of onboard, right? In a very funny way, right?
Right.
And we've been a very sensitive society in terms of what people are going to talk about, what people are going to look at, right? Unlike West, which has not necessarily been concerned around such social nuances. Uh, what do you think of the noise that is coming, what's getting made in the process, right? Because, like I said, I mean, everybody wants to be a Shah Rukh Khan, right? And this is becoming a platform and a means to do that, right? What do you make out of the noise which is kind of getting generated, right? Which might just beyond a certain point become confusing because there's going to be a narrative and there's going to be an anti-narrative, right? There's going to be an advice and then there are like five other advices, right? That are well. What do you make out of the noise in an environment like this, right? Given that everybody is now converging into the same medium for consumption, right? What's
Right.
your sense?
Right. See, there are two aspects to this, Ashu. One is when you say noise, it like there's a pro aspect of it or the positive aspect of it, which typically would be there's a taker for every kind of content that you would be able to do. So, say if you are somebody who's living in Chennai but loves to talk about Punjabi food
Right.
in Tamil. Uh, with some very different kind of setting, if you're that niche, there are takers for the kind of content you're doing. So that's the positive side of this noise which is coming out. To a lot of people this might be noise, but maybe to five people this content would make a lot of sense. Okay.
Right.
um, Now, of course, along with that, there's a negative side of the noise as well, which is where these fake news come in,
Right.
misrepresentation of facts, and a lot of those problems come in. In
Right.
fact, a lot of times within the influencer marketing industry, a lot of people speak about how there are fake followers and bot followers, and the engagement is all fake, and it's all
Right.
like it's good for nothing, right? And yes, it was bound to happen. It is happening. The key here is how to use technology to separate the noise from what is valuable. Okay. And that's where a lot of these AI algorithms would come into play. In fact, we at DYT have created something called as a DYT score, which calculates or rather kind of scores every particular creator who comes on the platform using various parameters. This includes quality checks, this includes quantity checks in terms of the numbers and all. So a lot of those would becoming really handy these days. I mean, if you speak about 2 years back, like you said, an influencer would have been how many followers do you have and what is the engagement rate. But now, if you see, or now if you want to go and speak with the creator, there are just a whole lot of other parameters that you need to check and look at, and that's where technology is coming in. So noise would be there. It is supposed to be there rather, because you're making, you're doing decentralization, you're making it available for the public at large. But it can be separated using technology very effectively, and that becomes the key.
Very interesting. Again, I would love you to talk me through that particular bit, right? Because, like I said, it's very important, right? And to understand the technology aspects around it, right? I mean, how do you sort of, example, see a lot of right versus wrong, right? Correct and legitimate vis-a-vis, a lot of constructed information, right? Which is done in a certain common way, right? Tell me a little more about the technology in which helps you see all of this, or which you can extend to, or you continue to extend to your clients right now. Tell me a little more about
Right, right. So see, when you speak about technology, a lot of it would be to understand who these creators are, to personify them.
that.
I'll actually give you an example about one of the campaign that we did some time back. There's this leading consumer electronics brand which was launching a trimmer, a beard
Right.
trimmer,
Mhm.
and they wanted to get creators who can speak about that beard trimmer.
Right.
Now, in a non-tech environment, you would find people based on, like I said, the number of followers, the category, and maybe the engagement rate, and say, oh, here are these 10 people who should be speaking about that.
Right.
You don't even know whether this particular person sports a beard or not, or is it is he a Gillette kind of guy, a very clean shaved guy? You usually don't know that, right? But if you
Right.
approach this guy and tell him I'd pay you X amount of money, he'd be more than happy to be like, okay, give me the trimmer, I'll
Right.
do some sort of image and post on that, right? As opposed to when you have technology and you say, okay, I have seen the kind of content these people do in the past, and in 90% of the content pieces that they've done, they've spotted a beard in.
Right.
He is an authentic guy. You should be kind of approaching this particular person to speak about
Mhm.
the trimmer. Now, this is a clear differentiation of what can happen with technology and what was or is still to a lot of extent
Mhm.
happening, right?
Right.
And there's just one piece of it. I mean, now there are advanced technologies available which would literally enable, for example, in our case, if you want to speak with somebody who has created content wearing sunglasses on the beach and wearing a red t-shirt in the past, we can give you those kind of guys as well.
Right.
And this is just, on the targeting front,
Mhm.
right? On the other front, of saying whether this guy, or would this guy have fake followers or not, or
Mhm.
would the engagement actually is meaning and is
Right.
giving me some sort of outcome or not. All those metrics are now available to be tracked. Like I said, I mean, this is all crunched into something that we call as a DIT score,
Mhm.
and it's available for all the clients to kind of have a look at.
Very interesting. Again, tell me something, right? So I mean, there's one aspect of it which is, for example, certain visible factor, right? I mean, the person on the beach, right, wearing whatever swimsuit, whatever. I'm saying, depending on whatever the requirement is, right? But then there is, of course, that then there is this content, right, which is now getting delivered in that say a video, for example, right, that individual is creating. India is a complex market. I mean, and I'm making it a little more India centric, right? Because of the complexities, right,
Mhm.
that our market offers, and it's a market which is at its infancy, right? It's not a homogeneous market, right?
Mhm.
So homogeneous markets are easy to sort of operate in, right? India is an extremely complicated market, right? Because of our preferences, right? Because of our cultural aspects, right? That we carry, right, with us, right? We 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 grow up in a certain way, right? We grow up in a household,
Correct.
right? It just becomes very complex, right? How does one tackle that, right? How does one tackle that the calibration of the narrative is correct, right? You know, what happens in an environment like that? Because for one community it could make sense, right? For the other community it could just completely be very, very offensive, right? How does that happen?
Correct. So again, Ashu, to answer the question in a very simple format, it's technology, and I'll again give you an example of the same campaign that I was speaking about. Now, when
Right.
you speak about spotting beard, like you
Right.
said, for one community it can be really really good, but there is a section of community which does not believe in kind of trimming hair and cutting hair, and for them it might be really really offensive.
Right.
So this is where humans can get fooled. Humans can look at the profiles or look at the people and say, okay, I don't understand what to do. But when you come down to technology, the technology knows it all. So what we do at our end is we whatever content pieces we're getting from these creators, we would benchmark them against the content pieces which are already available across the
Right.
internet, and then come to conclusion. So the algorithm that I'm speaking about takes into consideration about 800 different parameters, which includes looking at the content from a racism perspective, from a sexism perspective. So it would automatically screen content which is let's say racist or nude. There's
Right.
any form of nudity involved, or there's any form of abuse which is involved. It would already screen those content pieces, and then hence screen the creators of the campaign. And this is just to say you're getting started, because there's just a lot of potential which India is still kind of getting used to. Internationally, it has been used, and there have been some really, really good use cases. And very rightly said, because we are so heterogeneous. I mean, these use
Right.
cases would make a lot of sense for us. So
Interesting.
we're getting warmed up to that.
Interesting, and I completely understand where you're coming from. Right? I think there's a huge application of AI and NLP. I think there's a lot of work which is happening on that front. Right? I think there are many startups that are actually coming in and actually solving for that problem. Right? I'm sure so are you. Right? But Ankit, tell me this. Right? So a lot of what you're doing, right? I mean, given the complexity that we're kind of operating in, right, and also the brand side expectation, because there's a large services model around it, right? What's I mean, is this how? What percentage of what you do is essentially still requires a lot of large human resource, right? Because, like I said, I mean, there are expectations that need to be matched, right? Services is something which is extremely cumbersome, right? Because uh, there are expectations, right, from the client side, right? What percentage of this is still held or gets delivered in an offline conversational environment?
Right.
Is that the difficult part?
No, really good question, Ashu. In fact, I've been asked this question. I don't know how many times now. I've lost
Right.
count of it. I'm very right in saying, this particular question is pretty important. See, when we speak about technology, or when we speak about being or using something as self-serve capacity, India has always been behind. We are a country where we would prefer a driver to drive the car as compared to driving it all by ourselves, and that's because of a lot of reasons, of course, which includes human resources being at a very cost-effective manner, being available to almost everybody, right? But even in that scenario, there's this bell curve that you generally follow. There would always be people who would be early adopters. In our case, these early adopters are startups and people who would love to do things in a self-serve capacity. And then there would be people who would want you to do it on their behalf.
Right.
See, eventually, everything's still happening from the platform. What we have to understand is, even if you're doing managed services for a particular client, it's still happening from the platform. With the only difference being, we are doing it on their behalf. They still would have access to the platform. They still would be able to see everything on the platform, do whatever they want to do from the platform. But there definitely is a lot more education which is required in that sense, because like I said, I mean, we are slightly, there is that friction that we have going from a managed services to a self-serve, perspective. So that's there, definitely there. So from a percentage perspective, I'm not sure if I can give you an exact percentage right away, but we have seen the adoption happening really, really well. And we have seen people taking it up really well, especially in the startup scenario. So in the startup scenario, it's almost 80 to 90%, I would suggest, where people have started taking the platform and using it all in the self-serve capacity. But in the bigger organizations, or in the like bigger brands, if I put it that way, we still have a lot, long way to go. There's still some education needed.
Very interesting. And Ankit, is this priced as a SaaS, right? What's your current business model, right? I mean, across many of the things that you do, right? What is the business model? What's the revenue model?
So for the creators, we're completely free of charge right now. In fact, all the courses that you'd see in the academy, they're all free of charge at this point in time. We're not charging a single penny from them. From the brands, there are various models. There is a SaaS model. There are various subscription plans which are available, depending on how many campaigns would you want to do, or how many creators would you want to speak with, and all of that. And then there definitely is an enterprise edition where say if there is any custom requirement by bigger brands or by bigger agencies which comes in, then we'd customize the subscription model for them, and we'd go forward accordingly.
Very interesting. Ankit, I want to move a little towards the market side of this, right? Right, and it becomes an important part of the discussion, because there's a huge debate which is going around, right, in terms of how the influencer marketing play is going to shape up, right? There's one school of thought which considers this to be an extremely important play, and then of course there's this school of thought which is that there's a lot of noise. It needs to settle down. There's some sort of institutionalization that needs to come in, right, before it becomes a long-term commercially viable proposition, right, for many brands to continue to take up, right? I stand somewhere in the middle, right? But what's your sense of it, right? I mean, you are right in the thick and thin of things, right? You're engaging with a lot of brands right now. What are the kind of expectations the brands have? What are the kind of impact assessments are happening, right, as part of that relationship, right? And do you think this is something which is they're getting the value that they need to get out of this, right? Or is this an early medium which they're experimenting with, flirting with right now? And the seriousness around this entire relationship is going to possibly evolve in the next couple of years, right? What's your sense of what's happening, the promotion that is there as the industry is concerned, right? And I'd love to know the industry numbers as well, the growth numbers, and some of those adoption numbers.
Right, right. So I'll actually zoom out slightly, Ashu, when you speak about influencer marketing. Let's look at the creator economy first, and then kind of zoom in towards influencer marketing and speak about that. Uh, you see, what has started happening is there's this, like I said, because of decentralization of content and a lot of these tools and phones being available. There's this economy which has been created, which is called as a creative economy. Now, it has majorly two or three sides to it. Okay, one is what can a creator do for another creator. Okay, the second is what can a creator do for brands, or what can a creator do to promote something or to advocate something.
Right.
Right. And then the third is the entire ecosystem which is getting built. Like I said, a lot of these ancillary services getting inbuilt and everything. Now, just one part of it is influencer marketing, where which actually started as brands being able to only use these influencers slash creators as publishing tools. Okay, they said, okay, you have 100,000 followers, you have whatever, say 50,000 of reach.
Right.
Why don't you speak about my product? And that's the start, or that was the start and the end of it, at least sometime back. Now, lately, what has started happening is people have realized that this guy is not just a publishing tool.
Right.
He has the numbers, but he has the numbers because of a reason. Okay, because he's a good creator, right? That's when content creation got added. That's when brands started saying, or people started saying, okay, let me get content or branded content creation done at scale. Now think about 500 people creating content for me as compared to one agency. One agency would have a small creative team, 5 people, 10 people, maybe 15 people, right? Here you can have the option of literally having 500 different minds creating content for you in one go, right? That's where another layer got added, which was content creation along with promotion. Okay, then the brands started taking the second step or the third step rather, and said, okay, let's not just do promotion, let's see if we can do advocacy as compared to promotion. Okay, and that's where the dynamic started to change. That's where people started to say, if you consume my brand, if you use me, then you speak about me. Otherwise, I don't think there's any sense for you to speak about me just because I'm paying you some amount of money, right? So we've come a long way, like I said, from utilizing these guys only as numbers to now being able to say, okay, this guy is using my product and is advocating for it and is also creating content which I can use. Okay, to the extent that Ashu, there are brands that we have on board which are being built completely at the back of content created by these creators. They don't have an agency on board. I mean, they do have an agency, but it's only to do the narratives and all. And the rest, the entire content is getting, and when I say the entire content, it would mean content going on social, content going on their paid ads, on their website, on their hoardings, blah, 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 everything entirely coming in from the creators as compared to any other place. So there's a lot of maturity which is coming in. The industry has been growing by leaps and bounds. In fact, I was reading this article by INC42 just a couple of days back, which said India itself is expected to have about 100 million creators, and that's a huge number. I mean, 100 million creators is just a huge market to tap in. If you look at the global numbers again, if you're looking at doing what about 120 or rather 100 billion of spends already happening within this industry. So again, that's a huge number to look at. So the numbers have been good. In fact, I hate to say this, but pandemic did push it in a positive sense. There was an initial slurp where content did not get created, but then brands very soon realized there's no production house working, there's no place that they can get content shot on, and hence went to these creators who created content right within their homes. So the industry is changing. Definitely getting matured as we speak. In fact, vernacular content is one of the things which hasn't even been kind of explored literally at the surface right now. So I'd say it's moving in the right direction. There's still a lot to explore. There's still a huge way to go. But definitely the trend looks interesting.
Interesting. Ankit, 100 billion for many reports, right? I think it's for a large ship like India, right, which is essentially at that age bracket, right, where we are kind of a very different consumption. We are hungry for consuming many new experiences, right? Things, right? So I think 100 billion is just kind of too small a number, right? And with the complexities that we have, I think. But what is more important, and essentially is what I want to talk to you in this particular question, right? Is that you know, brand advocacy is one thing, right? What is essentially happening is that, you come across a lot of these profiles, right, where people have followers, right? They're not necessarily users, right? This is a freebie. That experience is a freebie, right? And it becomes almost necessary for them to create a positive narrative. I mean, for example, if you look at food, right, what is happening? There are no food. I mean, I was looking at a video, right, where this guy in Ahmedabad, he's talking about a chai which is loaded with a chocolate syrup. Beat that, right? Are you going to have it? Am I going to have it? I have my doubts, right? But I think because it was possibly a freebie, right, he was under a pressure to create a positive narrative, right? What essentially that means is that a lot of this content which is getting created on the back of it being free, right, is essentially navigating people or negatively influencing people to consume a certain thing, right? What that essentially does is it could temporarily be a good thing, right? But in the longer term, it's destructing the confidence of the consumer, right? Which is extremely important, which, ideally a positive narrative should have created, right? A positive experience should have created, right? Do you think a lot of this is about to change, right? A lot of this will possibly, the relationship will possibly change. It's going to be an outcome-based relationship, something that we're seeing in OOH right now, right? In traditional media, where, a lot of people are building those short codes and, and QR codes saying that, boss, you deliver and monetize, right? Do you think that's something that we're going to see much faster than what we've seen before? What's your sense of this, right? I mean, like I said, I mean, it's an extremely complex position, right? Do you think brands will have that in a way an onus to ensure that there is right consumption which has happened and the advocacy is right, and not necessarily influenced because somebody is getting something for free?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, we've already seen that happening, Ashu. There's a hybrid model that we have been working with a couple of brands, already. And I'll tell you how this is changing. For example, at DYT, whenever we do a campaign with a particular brand, we generally tell them not to send freebies at all. We tell them let them buy the product, let the consumer, let the influencer or the creator invest in the product upfront, because that's where they become your consumer. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, I can write anything if you're giving me a freebie. That just doesn't make sense at all. So that's one of the changes which have happened, and which we are kind of leading almost, if I have to put it that way. The other piece which has changed is a lot of tracking has been enabled now as compared to what it used to be earlier. So you can now actually track what is the outcome that you're getting from these creators, and which is where I said it's a hybrid model that we've started doing, where content creation is one aspect of it, but we're like a lot of brands are no longer looking only at reach numbers or engagement numbers, but are looking at the needle getting moved, looking at sales happening, or looking at downloads happening, or actual authentic users coming on board. So it has started happening, and it would not completely actually, but almost 80% it would engulf the way you do creator marketing or content marketing. It would change very, very soon. Absolutely at the right conception,
and I hope I hope for good, right? I hope for good, right? Because I think at the end of the day, my sense is, right, I think that the customer's experience should not be bad, right? I think what they should get is right content where they can decide for themselves. They should have the positives and the negatives, and like I said, right, the ownership has to be at a consumer's level, right? I think paid influences can have very detrimental long-term effect, right? And it can just completely wipe off the confidence, right? And I think that is destructive for digital as a medium as a whole. Right?
Absolutely, Ashok.
Okay, I'm going to move into another question, right? And this is actually that of essentially competition, right? With what you're doing. Now, you are coming somewhere in the middle. You're essentially an enablement platform, right? Where there is a brand and then there is a creator, and you're sitting somewhere in the middle, right? And of course, you're kind of evangelizing it by, sensitizing more and more creators, helping them become more institutionalized, right? To offer the practice. There are many platforms that have come in, and this is more a question on competition, right? And these are platforms which essentially are platforms where people are going and creating kind of content, right? Of course, there is a certain direction, there is a certain channelization in which people are doing this kind of content, but there's a higher frequency, right? And these are people who are now also engaging with brands, right? What's your sense of it, right? How do you look at that, right? Because there is a lot of money which is going into that zone, right? There are a lot of people who are, and these are self-serving platforms, right? Where there are consumers who are consuming for the content that's getting produced. Now many of these platforms have actually started to have an entry price, right, where they can engage with the creator. So a lot of creators are now getting incentivized to be on these platforms. What do you make out of this, right? Are we getting into an environment where there's going to be lesser free content and more content behind paid walls? What's your sense of it? And from a competition standpoint, right? Do you think there is going to be more competition, or a significant competition to you, as an enablement platform, vis-a-vis these self-serving platforms? What's your sense of it? How do you make out? What do you make out of this?
Right. See, one thing is there definitely is a lot of platforms coming in, a
Right.
lot of companies also getting formed, and it's just a good thing to look at because it reinstates the belief that we have within the creator economy. I mean, competition is always good. It's always good to have multiple people trying to do the same thing. The industry grows, the category grows, and eventually land up having a bigger pie or a piece
Right.
of pie as compared to what it was, right? So that's, like I said, that's something I'm really really happy about, that people are coming in. Now from a competition to us perspective, see, there are various, again, there are various sides, like I said, to the creator economy. One is there are brands or there are platforms which are enabling creators to do paid content with their subscribers so that
Right.
they can get a living off that. That's where internationally Patreons of the world kind of come in, and Patreon has done this really really well. In fact, I mean, they are maybe one of the leading ones in this case. Then there are platforms where you have monetization purely based on brand opportunities kind of coming in. And then there are platforms which are very very new. There are platforms which are doing credit cards based on your social media history or social media
Right.
numbers. So that's the kind of innovation side of the play. Okay, now we are actually at the cusp of all of these three. So we kind of are right in between. In the center, we are doing the creators, like we're helping them to monetize in various perspectives, including brand monetization. We're doing the academy bit, we're doing the ancillary services bit. So I'd suggest, from a competition perspective, there are a lot of indirect competitors that we have. There are a couple of direct competitors. I'd not want to name them, of course. Like I said, but
Sure.
it's a very different scenario. Okay, it's a very very different scenario, and I'm very very bullish about this category going literally about like anywhere between 15 to 20 times to what it is right now, just in a couple of years, and that's the kind of growth we are looking at. So competition's healthy. We welcome it. We learn from them a lot, in fact, and I hope it kind of keeps on growing.
Interesting. Interesting. Ankit, you've raised a round of capital, right? And I think that's part of every startup's journey, right? And you've essentially taken the direction of productization, right, of what you're doing, right? The platform that is space. Tell me a little more about that, right? What's in the future? What are the next 2.5 years like for DYT, right? I would have loved to ask you a 5-year question. I think we're in very difficult and real times, right? I think that will be unjustified, right? And possibly I'll have another reason to come back to you in just about a couple of months, right, and discuss the 5-year question, right? So in line with all of that, right, what are the next two and a half years?
See, we've been growing, or we've been doing crazy numbers.
Right.
I mean, when I look at the numbers, when I look at the kind of growth we've been clocking, me and Hemant, we generally speak about this, and we're like, how is this coming? We have expected this to happen. So it's been really, really good. The last 1.5, 2 years, it has been a roller coaster ride. There's just been so many improvements on the product side. We've raised some rounds. We're very happy that we have some prolific, some very well-known angel groups kind of backing us. And we have not done any serious funding round as of now. When I say serious, we're still in the seed stage. So about 400,000 USD is what we have done till date. And that's, honestly, that's what we needed. We are operationally positive. We're not burning any money. So we're like, okay, whatever we need is typically to grow ourselves from where we are to, let's say, the X number or Y number. And we've already done that. We've proved that to the investors time and again, to the brands time and again, and to our creators as well time and again. There's just been a lot of positive news coming in from all the sides. The next 2.5 years would be actually to go from here to be able to own the entire life cycle of a creator, right from when this creator starts to or rather wants to be a creator, from when he says, oh, I want to be a creator, to
Right.
when he becomes more like a celebrity or a cyber celebrity. We want to own that entire life cycle, that entire chain, and be able to do value adds for all of these guys at all these stages. And that's what the journey for us would be. This definitely would include a lot of add-ons, stuff like I said, Academy, a very recent launch, very bullish about that. So that's what we're looking at. We would be raising some more funds very, very soon. We have not officially opened anything, so I can't disclose anything here. But we are in advanced level discussions with some of the very well known people, I'd suggest, or all of these VCs and all, and there've been like some really, really good interest coming in, but we're yet to open it formally. So
no, that's amazing, and I think we'll reserve for our next conversation, that point for our next conversation, and hopefully it'll be in a post funding event, right? And I'd love to know a little more about what's going to happen with those funds, right? In terms of how do you expand, what's going to be the product roadmap, all of that, right? My last question, second last question, right, is what are some of the emerging areas that you think are going to be extremely are going to adopt to influencer marketing, right? Or creators, for example, right, to go out and actually communicate the narrative, right? Which are D2C, for example, is something that we've known, right? I mean, D2C, many brands have now, for example, in the D2C space, they used influencers very, very effectively, right, to actually go out and communicate the narrative, right? Some right, some wrong. I mean, but I think jury's still out on that one. But what's your sense, right? Which are some of the upcoming sectors that you think are going to be adopting to the creators economy possibility, right? Or for them to sort of go out and create a narrative and essentially engage a lot of customers.
See, a couple of places actually. NFT is a very promising one. We've seen India kind of adopting that very, very quickly. Internationally, it has made headlines literally a lot of places. So that's one that I'm really, really bullish on. It should happen in the Indian context very, very soon. Virtual influencers, again, virtual creators and influencers, that's something that India is yet to pick up on. I mean, again, internationally, it has made headlines, and India is we're not way behind in that sense. So that's another one which is coming up. Then there are a lot of new kind of content creators or creators who are coming up. So audio creators, a lot of these new say crypto creators or people who are talking about finance. I mean, all of these generally in the last 1.5 years they've picked up really, really well, purely because of the market kind of growing very well. So they've been kind of growing alongside with these guys. So that's another one which I'm really, really bullish on. Tech, like I said, is the underlying core of it. It has to be enabled by tech. There is just no other way out. I mean, this whole the entire agency model, it's going to fall. When I say it's going to fall, I mean they would be doing a different kind of work. But if you want to scale, then tech is the only way out.
Phenomenal. Ankit, my last question, right? I mean, every founder has a journey, right? And it's not a smooth one, right? I think 99.99% of the time it's not a smooth one, right? He or she has to go through his or her set of learning curves, right? There are ups and then there are downs, right? And there are moments that you question yourself, right? That why did you choose to do what you're doing, right? And it's not an easy phase, right? And I think every founder has a learning, right? So typically, my last question, I think, across every conversation is that a founder can always and should always share his or her learning, right? And they could possibly communicate it in a suggestive way or as part of an advice, right? If I'm to ask you that, right, I'm sure you've had your thick and thin. You've had your share of wins and losses. What's been that learning, right, that you think you would want to communicate to many others who are going to hear this conversation, right? What would that advice, suggestion be?
So a couple of points actually, Ashu, and I'm glad that you've asked this question because I myself look at other founders and try to learn from them almost all the time. So one of the very early advices actually which was given to me by one of our advisors is be high, like supremely high on the EQ. And at that point in time, I did not understand. I was like, okay, you're saying it because you're saying it, but I generally don't know how do I digest this? And then I started realizing so initially when we started, there were days when I was happy, there were days when I was sad, there were days when I was really sad. And then it started changing to hours, and then it started changing to minutes and started changing to seconds. So like literally right now it is 1 second I'm on top of the world. Oh my God, we've done so much,
Right.
which is the best. And then the other second I'd be like, dude, what is happening? It's
Right.
just not working out. I think it was all a mistake. So the key is to actually be right somewhere in the middle. So if you're
Right.
really happy, celebrate, but don't go out of your way. And if you're really sad, try to come back to normalcy.
Right.
Don't like be overtly sad. These things are bound to happen. So that's one that I really keep close to my heart, and I try to follow it almost every day, multiple times actually. The second one is again something which one of the people or one of my bosses in the UK used to say a lot. We are a startup, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a plane while flying one.
Right.
And it's very, very difficult to do that. And now I understand what he meant. Things would not be ideal. There would always be missing components. There would always be, things going out of line.
Right.
You'd not be able to, or rather, you'd not have control on a lot of things. By just, what's important is just to make sure you're flying and you keep flying. You just don't have to, crash land or land at all. Just keep flying. Just stay there, just hang in there, and you should be fine.
Ankit, you'll be surprised, right? So I think, I've been doing many conversations, right? And I think one conversation, which is one actually suggestion and advice that stayed with me, right, was from Deep, Deep Bajaj, right? From P Buddy, right? And Deep mentioned something very interesting, right? He said, I have a 1,000-day rule, right? And he's like, a lot of these things you can control, a lot of these things you can't control, right? And those are eccentricities and those are extremes that you have to live with as a founder. I have a 1,000-day rule, right, which helps me normalize every condition, right? And I'm going to, irrespective of whatever happens, I'm going to be at it for like 1,000 days, right? That's personally stayed with me, and I think what you're saying essentially is the same, right? Is that just be at it, right? Irrespective of wins and losses, right? Just be at it, because the outcome is going to be a lot more beautiful than
absolutely,
right? Ankit, with that, thank you so much for joining us. Right, it was a fantastic conversation. Loved every bit of it. Thank you for taking us through your journey and talking about the influencer marketing space, right? The content creator space, right, as a whole. And I completely resonate with what you're saying, right? I think there's a huge possibility for India. I think 100 billion is just too small a number. I think a lot of these reports, I kind of rubbish them because India is at a very different cusp, right? And the possibility of consumption, the possibility of monetization, I think we're just getting at it, right? There are certain structural issues that we are grappling with, and my sense is that's something which government is working hard to kind of solve. But I think once those are sorted, we're going to be in a very different environment, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much for joining. It was a lovely.
Thank you, Ashu. Same here. Loved every part of it, Ashu. Thank you so much for having me. And you have a good day ahead.